Good afternoon, everybody. I have to use this microphone because we're on live stream. I'm not used to using the microphone as well. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Kirsty Brown. I'm from Australia, which is Asia Pacific region, and I'm working with Ralph Dillman, and he'll be doing the second part of the session. We're going to do some short inputs, 10 minutes each, roughly, and then we'll be breaking into discussion groups, and that will be up to you then to work through the questions, and you'll need someone to report back on the discussions that you've had in your group. We are on live stream, so we will have some people online passing in questions to us. I hope most of you have had a look at the paper that we put on the web. If not, you may not follow the session as quickly as if you had read it. If you haven't had the opportunity to read the papers, I would suggest later you have a look at them, and then the PowerPoint probably will make more sense for you after the session. So what is volunteering? Actually, when you do the research on volunteering, there's actually no one definition in the world. The ILO has about 5 or 6 different definitions, and each country also has their own. In Australia, we say volunteering is an activity which always takes place through non-profit organisations and projects, and it's of benefit to the community and to the volunteer. Undertaken of the volunteer's own free will and without coercion, and for no financial payment. So if we're a volunteer in our country, we get no money. Volunteering means doing something for someone freely and by choice without being forced. That's what New Zealand says, their government. The Asian model of volunteering is influenced by religion, culture, history, politics, and even the setting. So depending on which country you live in, the term volunteering in Asia will mean something different. And I see a few people here that will know. Do you know that in the world at the moment, young people are volunteering to go abroad more often than volunteering in their own country? They like to go and work on humanitarian functions when there's disasters, buildings, and other projects. So Scouting needs to look at that to make sure that we're offering the same opportunities. Currently, 60% of females in Australia volunteer, and 40% are male. They're generally aged between 20 and 29. These are the people going overseas. 2 or 3 of them will have an undergraduate or a graduate degree. 72% are fully employed. 16% were students. Most were single. I don't know why they're all single that go. Maybe they weren't allowed if they were married. And 1/3 took 5 international trips in a year. I looked in the research in the United Kingdom, and they found that formal volunteering in the community was at least once a year. So it's slightly different on the 2 sides of the world. 39% volunteered in 2010-11, and it increased to 44% in January 2013. And there's some interesting reasons for that if you look at the research. In Belgium, anyone from Belgium here? 15% of people from the community dedicate themselves to voluntary work. Would you agree with that? That's what the statistics say. Now, over time, the term volunteering has changed. So if we look at the past, it was when people were asked to do work that was identified by the organisation. Now think about where this sits with Scouting. There was a clear distinction between the work done by the volunteer and by the paid professional. Volunteer programs have been built around structure, form and systems to manage the volunteer. So that's the past. Volunteers were expected to be altruistic. Now, currently, the volunteer identifies the work that they're interested in doing. So if you think about Scouting, they come because they're interested in Scouting. That's the work they want to do. They're asked and are being asked to do the same work as the paid volunteer, or what the volunteer has done, or the professional has done. They're entrepreneurial, creative, and want freedom from systems and structure. And I think we heard some of that this morning in the input sessions. They're more open about their self-interests. So can you think about people that fit into those categories? Now, there's various types of volunteers throughout the world, and some of these may seem strange to some of you. There's a classical volunteer. There's the new volunteer, and we call them episodic. They're the ones that come for a very short duration. So are they the person that becomes a scout leader for 1 year or 2 years and then goes and does something else? There's the sheltered volunteer. They're the ones that are going over on the humanitarian projects. There's the corporate volunteers. And in many countries, the corporate businesses these days give so many days in 1 year to an organisation and volunteer their time to do something for an NGO. So where does Scouting sit in those examples? There's 3 types of motivation I found when I did some research. I guess in my country we'd say, what's in it for me? That would be a typical comment. But in Europe they would be asking about the value of volunteering. But it actually means the same thing. What's the value of what I'm doing? There's relationships volunteering, where they wanted to go to a particular organisation or they go with their friends, they develop relationships with a country. And there's cause volunteering. They volunteer for a cause. There's other trends that affect volunteering, and that's the attitudes in the country. It's the culture, it's the values, and so they differ from country to country, and when you get in your discussion groups, you'll talk about the differences. Risk management. Some countries are very concerned about the risk management for the volunteer. There's people that want to volunteer with migrants and with refugees. There's the population increase and decrease that affects volunteering. In your country, is your volunteering increasing with your population, or is it decreasing? The challenges. What kind of volunteer service is best for Scouting? Think about these as we go, because that'll help you with your discussions. Can Scouting offer opportunities for the adventure sought abroad, using a person's skills and interests to deliver the aspects of Scouting? And that goes to what I started talking about people wanting to volunteer abroad. Do modern trends of volunteering in Scouting take the best of the traditional ways and lend them to technology, population trends, family structure, education, employment, creating a dynamic, vibrant and growing movement worldwide? Interesting question. Boy Scouts of America had a volunteering survey. It is old, but it has some interesting aspects that they said about being a volunteer. It builds pride in my community, reinforces ethical and moral character, builds tolerance, patience and openness to new ideas, builds self-esteem and reduces stress, helps strengthen communication skills, improves teaching skills, helps develop relationship skills with youth, strengthens relationships with other adults, helps me become a better manager, an employee or an employer. People use their skills in their paid employment. Strengthens leadership skills. Deliberate. Have we volunteered in scouting for a cause? Anyone want to comment? You think you volunteered for a cause? Think about it. If so, what trends are we following? What type of volunteer are you? Do you understand exactly what it is that motivates you to volunteer? Are the trends in volunteering causing scouting to look to modern technology to play a role in the resurgence of volunteerism? Do the modern trends of volunteerism take the best of the traditional ways and blend them with the technology of today, creating a volunteerism that is dynamic, vibrant and growing?
Okay. What is volunteering according to the United Nations General Assembly 2001 resolution? Kirsty already referred to something of this. It is something that you do with a free will. It's not an obligation. It is undertaken without a financial reward, and of course it is for common good benefit for people within a special community or whatever. According to the State of the World's Volunteerism Report 2011, we can get some data from what's in with our topic today. It is an expression of human relationships where volunteers nowadays feel that they add value to what they are doing. They work for specific values: solidarity, reciprocity, mutual trust, belonging, empowerment. Volunteers feel that they contribute to the well-being of individuals, their communities, their societies. They to consider that they give their time, their work, their energy, and their talent in their work. And this is important when we analyze that what will be, from our point of view, in there. But the way of when, how, or what he or she is engaging in volunteering has changed in the recent years. Kirsty already said it, and we find it, according to the report, in the same way. Globalization is a strong factor on how volunteering is developing. new technologies, and of course, corporate and social responsibility from the private sector has also had a strong influence in all the volunteering. One of the new trends is the online volunteering. It is giving, it's on internet, it is giving a new way of volunteering because you are not bound to specific times or specific locations to do so. You don't have to do it in the long term. You can just engage in short, specific causes to do so. So this increases, in fact, the freedom and the flexibility of the volunteer engagement. So how we could use this online volunteering, for example, in our activities in scouting. How are we going to face this? Another trend is the diaspora volunteering. Those who got abroad, they leave their countries just to get short assignments, but mainly to get knowledge and to can get back to their communities to apply and to use that knowledge. So this is another way of finding why they are volunteering. And of course, this is something that, for me at least, it was a bit surprising, that particular young people today, all over the globe, they spend more time in volunteer activities. It seemed to me that it was in my mind that it was not that way, that volunteering was getting down and lower, but studies show that in fact young people are available and are more willing in our days to do volunteer activities. And particular, not only these specific causes, but mainly also those who are organized within NGOs and all that social causes. Contrary to what we maybe think, the income of a person does not influence the willingness of volunteering. It's not that only a specific economic sector is willing of volunteering. No, it's the income poor or those who are wealthy are as well willing to volunteer and to give their knowledge and whatever so they can be used. Volunteering is, in fact, another way to find inclusion, and particular in those populations or in those groups that generally are excluded. And we can see that can happen with women, with young people, or with persons with special needs, or from different communities. And in fact, volunteering also goes beyond just completing a specific task. It makes and it sustains bonds of trust, social cohesion, and of course it helps to develop identity in the environments and in the groups. According to this, of course, this is not new. We all know that our fifth strategic priority comes from 1999, but it's still as fresh as it was by then. And we, as a movement, we have to start again to rethink, to redefine the concept of volunteering and how, according to the trends we just showed, how are we going to work on it? Why do we do volunteering? This is according to the United Nations volunteers. And in general terms, it is because we can learn, we can use it to have a new skill, to develop new skills. We can be part of a specific community so that we get involved in it. It helps us to develop new interests, hobbies. We can get the sense of achievement in doing specific activities. We can, of course, earn new experiences. meet new people, boost other career options with the work. And this, for example, is interesting because a survey done in the UK showed that among 200 of the UK's leading business, for example, 70% of the employees would recruit a candidate with volunteering experience. So it helps, in fact, volunteering helps, in fact, and they feel it and they sense it in that way, that it helps them to improve in their careers. So these are, of course, motivations to volunteer, and these are trends so we can use them in our movement. What is it in our case? We have our mission. Our mission in Scouting is clear, we all know it. But why should we volunteer in Scouting? That's the question that we are asking always around. Of course, there are some of the motivations. It might help us to know other people and whatever, but we have to analyze it, and we will find that, of course, we are doing a huge job in contributing to the education and also playing an important part of our communities. And when we are thinking about how we are going to use the trends of volunteering and the adults with which we want to work to develop this mission, we have to keep all that in mind. This has a huge impact in what we know as well as the life cycle of an adult. Because at this part where we are searching or the recruitment or when we are in the part of attracting the adults, we have to clearly have in mind what are the trends, why are they getting in, and how does this work during the whole process. For those who are not familiar with this 3 phases, it's very simple. We have the recruitment phase where we have maybe specific job descriptions or where there are the opportunities to get into volunteer, where we contract with the person. Then we have all the operation where the person probably gets his training, if there is a lack of training, where we get the support. And finally, there is the evaluation and decision for the future, how if we go on and so on. And this has a deep impact in the way we have or we are running our movement and the retention we have. When we do not fulfill the right expectations during this process, for example, when we do not consider the trends, this will have an impact in the retention. If we, during the process, have complicated training schemes, or we do not provide the in-service support, or whatever, we will have an impact in retention. So we have to recognize that the trends, it's not only to know what the trends are, we have to consider how the trends have a deep impact in the whole part of our life cycle of a specific position for an adult in our movement. So knowing the trends, it's not only in this part. It's not only the part where when we are trying to attract someone, ask him or he or she asks us, okay, what's in for me? Why should I volunteer for Scouting? No, we have to keep in mind that these trends and these interests and the motivations behind it have to keep present in all these stages. And this, of course, gives us the following discussion questions, where we want really to ask you, maybe we can make 3 very small groups, to analyze that what we have seen so far, these trends and the motivations that are behind and what we are doing, how they are related, and how we can include or think about challenges, barriers, or whatever in attracting adults or in the retention of adults whatsoever. Would you like to explain a bit more about this, Kirsty?
We have 3 questions, and we have about 30 minutes to discuss the 3 questions in the 3 groups. But if your group feels more comfortable to concentrate on just 2, we'll do that. You make that selection, which will help you. We need someone in the group that is prepared to do the report back, so you'll have to have a note taker, and someone will need to come out and stand out here on the green cross and report back, because remember we have participants online, and you'll have about 10 minutes each to present back. Do you understand? We'll hand out copies of this sheet so that it's easier for you to read it than on the screen, but you can also read it on the screen. Any questions? Okay. Can you put yourselves in 3 groups? Mix your countries up, please. Sort of one here. And it's probably one sort of about here and one there, I think. Now remember, someone take the notes and someone be prepared to stand up and speak to the questions. We have to report this back later. Everyone okay? We got any more questions come in? No, okay. No. We just got one about how they volunteer. Yes? This seems to be a big group here. All right, I won't split it. It's up to you. You haven't got a mailbox? It doesn't matter, we can collect them. We've got to do these at the end. That's okay. can we wrap up the discussion groups now, please? We need your report. And when the person comes out, I'd like them to introduce their group and tell me where each of you come from. So you need to check you know where everyone in the group comes from. Remember, we are being live streamed so that we have someone from Egypt online at the moment that's commenting. Everyone ready? All ready. Which group is discussing question 1? You have to come out the front to the green cross, please.
Okay, thanks, Kirsty. We had a very diverse group. We had somebody from Macau, we had somebody from Azerbaijan, somebody from Colombia, and somebody from Japan, and somebody from Hong Kong, and me from Ireland. So we started with introducing ourselves. So we didn't really stick to the task, which is pretty normal, I would suppose, with such a representative. So we didn't stick to the task. So we looked first at why each of us had chosen this particular work stream to understand the trends that affected us in each of our given areas. And we narrowed it down to 4 main trends in relation to volunteerism, which we could say was global because there was somebody from each region in our discussion group. And the global trends were that leaders stayed or volunteers stayed a short time. So that was a difficulty for us in how we could train them and how the traditions would grow. So that was one trend that was a difficulty for us. The other trend was leaders that stayed for too long. And they came in, bought into scouting, but didn't move on and let younger leaders in. So that was another trend that we had identified as problematic. We had, I had one more. Oh, yes, and then the last one was how you actually recruit. And there were difficulties around all of that for some of us, insofar as that people thought it was going to be difficult, particularly from Eurasia and Europe. Some of our trends have been that it's more difficult to get volunteers. And I was trying to think of a nice way of saying this, we weren't fashionable, I think was probably the expression. That we weren't modern enough looking, so therefore it was more difficult. Yeah, that was the terminology, wasn't it? So that made it tricky for us that we didn't seem a modern organisation. So there were the sort of difficulties that we came across. Another trend, which I'd forgotten, was that some of us were now having parents that wanted to be leaders who had no tradition in scouting, but they wanted to follow the journey with their child. Because they saw their child having such a good time in scouting, they also wanted to enjoy that. But these were people who had not understood scouting themselves as a child or had been a leader with us, and that caused difficulties. So there were the sort of 4 areas, I think, that we identified were sort of barriers and that we would have to, organisations, deal with. How to deal with it, we really hadn't any solutions. We recognised them. But certainly the one thing that I think came clear from discussions, that there needed to be flexibility around the adult and scouting model within our cultural differences, but also flexibility in our training schemes so that people, one of our ladies that were in our group had said it took her 10 years to complete her training, and that's very long. So that there needed to be more flexibility, particularly how we incorporated and trained our adults. Have I done a good job, guys? Is that it? That's it? Okay, thank you.
Don't leave. I'm going to ask you a question. Did your group discuss technology?
We did discuss technology, didn't we? Yeah, we did. But we were a little. Yes, we did discuss technology, but on the basis of how we each used it. and that there were some applications that could be used, and that would be useful to, make us look like that more modern organisation that we wanted to be. And yes, that technology we felt would be a more useful tool in helping our adults in the volunteering world.
I think that's one of our new challenges, isn't
Yes.
it? To use technology to a better advantage.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Anyone else got a question of Group 1? You don't have to be kind to them. Thank you, Group 1.
Okay,
well done.
very welcome.
Do you want to come out? Group 2. Who's reporting for the second question? Welcome,
Thanks, Kirsty.
Marty.
What the hell's wrong with you guys? I've done all this before. Thank you very much. Look, we had a great group, very diverse.
And you could tell us where they come from?
Well, I'm not going to get it all right, but it was interesting. We've got Oman, we've got the Taiwan, we've got Sweden.
Belarus?
Belarus, that's right, that's okay. Belgium, Guyana, right? Right. Ethiopia, Brunei, that's what I was trying to remember, and Sweden, of course. So we had a very diverse group, and it was really interesting. We spent a lot of time on question 1, actually, so Therese took our thunder there a little bit. But moving on to question 2, it was clear that we really do actually have to get our message right. This flows on from an interesting discussion I had in a previous session about our brand and whether we've got it right in our relationship to recruiting volunteers. So it was actually interesting to listen to everyone's perspectives here. One of the common themes that we saw, that actually, even though each NSO represented a different kind of diversity and a different group, that there were lots of similarities. So in other words, we're probably not quite as different as we think we are. It was interesting in Sweden, just seeing the difference. It's very similar, very, very similar problems. Pardon? Slow down. Oh, I'm speaking too fast, sorry about that. So there were some really great similarities, but I think the general consensus was here that we really have to develop the value proposition. Why is it that you'd want to engage? Now, that could be meaning different things for different folks. So, for instance, the value proposition based around engaging a parent, and maybe Teresa's model where someone doesn't know about scouting, could be quite completely different from engaging a 23 or 24-year-old who wants to do something special. So developing those statements, those value propositions for your different audiences seemed to be quite appropriate. There was no, I don't think there was anyone in disagreement that the family engagement, the concept that you actually not just want the child, but you actually want the family to get involved in their development is actually quite important as well. The family unit, whatever that may mean in whichever country you come from, and their engagement within the Scout environment, even as casual observers, is quite important. So overall, we felt that it's important to have a very positive message. You have to be accurate, you have to be honest. And I think that's a really important thing. We can't sell something that we're not, but we've got a very strong brand. And if we're open and honest and that we engage people and be respectful of their time, then there's no doubt that we will recruit volunteers. So overall, it was an interesting discussion. We probably didn't spend as much time on question 2 as we should have done. But nevertheless, I thank everyone for their input. It's been great.
Thanks, Marty. Do you want to make any comments on question 1? Because I know you did spend quite a bit of time on that, from yourself or from your group.
Anyone from the group like to make a comment on question 1? Because we did spend a bit of time. There were some good comments.
Come on, someone.
Don't be frightened. There's only the world watching. I think question 1, that was a good one. That was an interesting one because the trends, it's clear that the trends are changing. I mean, the statistics are showing that already. And, you know, this technology clearly has to be, we have to engage in the digital space. There's no doubt about it. I was explaining to our group about the value of the e-learning process that we've engaged in, so that we've actually been able to allow volunteers to do their training at home with their laptop or their PC while they're watching TV if they want to. So we're actually allowing folks to be able to set the pace for their own training. Now, we still have skills training, obviously, which we need to do, the face-to-face stuff. But a lot of the other stuff can be now done on e-learning. So that's a start of the embracing of technology, starting to use the digital space to free up, giving volunteers discretion. So we're talking about short-term volunteerism sometimes, or the digital space can help us achieve that. So that's probably one of the things.
Did you talk about education of the older age young people and the impact that has in scouting?
We probably didn't really touch on that one so much. I mean, certainly in Australia, we're looking at the venture age range as a really important tool for growth. In particular, the venturers, we're trying to align it with education. So community-based scouting, but engaging education and giving them university entry and things like that. So we're doing some quite interesting work in that right at this very moment, which will be, in time to come, could help us immensely grow that section, because like probably most NSOs, our older age range drops off quite dramatically. Around about 13 or 14, we start to see a big decline in numbers. So what we're hoping is that by reinventing the Adventurer program, delivering it within a school environment, scouting as we know it though, we're not taking away the scouting feel of it all, that we'll be able to engage a lot more kids in the program, and more importantly, they will be able to see the benefit not only from a practical sense in the activities they do, but from an educational sense as well.
Thank you, Marty. Anyone want to make comments on his report back? All right, the last group, Group 3. Who's the spokesperson? You're sharing. Good Scouts, they're sharing.
We are group retention, the smallest group. Okay, so I stand to recognize for the Republic of China, the Scout of China, Malaysian Scout Association, Scouts from Luxembourg, and from the Boy Scout of the Philippines. Okay, good evening. For number 3, regarding the retention, consider what recommendations to the NSO should be made to suggest changes. Example, leadership models, time availability, training system, okay, and etc. For us, as a volunteer, what we like to request from my NSO, maybe I think also from your NSO, is equal opportunity. Okay? The problem with my NSO will be always a problem for a lifetime. Okay? We are not allowed to join these kinds of activity, but we are very thankful for our Acting Secretary General to let us join this one. 20 years ago, we as a volunteer are not allowed to join these kinds of activity, only professionals one. So that's our outcry from the Boy Scout of the Philippines as a volunteer. As for training, we are also not allowed to join higher training unless you have the money and proper connections. But why we should have differentiate between professionals and volunteers who love to serve the boys? Okay? As a volunteer, we have 3 points for me. You got your time, your passion, and dedication. We have so many these kinds of people. Why? And other NSO doesn't open their eyes to have our services. Okay? It is sad, but we accept this. But for us, for me, all of these, the leadership, the models, time availability, training system, what we want is equal opportunity for the volunteers to serve. Not you are in the position, you can't go because you're only professionals. Okay. For the second part, I think I will have Luxembourg.
Thank you. Is it here? Yes.
Yes, that's it.
Hello.
We're all learning.
Okay.
This is technology. We're
Really?
all learning.
Is it? Okay. Okay, I was really embedded in Asia region because small Luxembourg, only Belgium maybe knows our country. Yes, thank you. And first I had to Yes, really. And Therese also, yeah. Yeah. So, okay, we are well known, but we only have 8,000 members in the two NSOs in Luxembourg. Compared to my friends in the Asian group, it's rather, small, let's say. Yeah. Therese shared about flexibility, and that was also one point that we raised. You should be flexible, very flexible on your, let's say, time frame or engagement of the persons who are doing the volunteering. But in our NSO, we also stated that it's important to have a formal recognition of what you did. So we had an agreement with our Ministry of Youth and Education that we can deliver an official paper for our members who want this paper, signed by the Chief Commissioner and the Minister of Youth, stating that our member has done several years of volunteering, and that official paper can be added next to a CV when he's looking for a job. And we are getting very good and positive reports from managers, let's say, or different branches or firms where people try to get a job, and they got it because they had that paper. So I think the flexibility is one thing, but also a formal recognition of what you did. We can do a lot of very good and nice things, and we are proud of it, but when other people don't know about it, so it's, we did it, but nobody knows it. So that's one I shared with my friends about, that method, or that's what we implemented, and it's a way of good sharing of good experience. Okay, thank you.
Don't go. Don't go for a minute. I think he made a very important point about the ministry giving him that piece of paper. Oh, the cross. Sorry. Technology. Something I have to learn too. You made a very good point when you talk about that piece of paper that you now can add to your CV when you're applying to jobs. And I hope some of the other countries think a lot about that. Certainly in the experiences that I've had around our region here in the Asia Pacific, there's many countries here where we do attach our scouting history to our resume when we're applying for jobs, and young people that have the top awards in scouting tend to get better jobs in corporate services. And we've discovered recently too, that I've observed, that now with the corporate companies volunteering, if you can get them to come and volunteer in scouting, maybe just cleaning up around a scout hall or painting it or doing something, they learn a lot more about scouting, and they're prepared to accept that, we hide our light under a bushel, don't we? We don't really tell people how good we are and what we can do. And I think you made an extremely good point. Anyone else got a comment to Group 3? No. Yes.
Maybe just to... No, it can also be beyond the... just to think about it also in our NSOs or in our NSAs. I don't know if you already have made a survey and if you are aware of how long a volunteer usually stays within an NSO or an NSA. Let's say, for example, 2 or 3 decades ago, it was very simple to say someone is joining and he will hopefully stay all his life within the organization. So we can have the luxury to run a training program which will take him, in fact, 10 years to get a wood badge and another 15 years more to be a 3-beater and hopefully 20 years more to be a 4-beater and so on, because time was not a matter for us. Nowadays, things have changed. A general survey, or at least in our region, shows that usually the average is in between 2.5, 3.5 years that a volunteer usually stays within an NSO. Of course, it's useless for us to run a training program which will take you 5 years to get something if 1.5 years before you are already leaving. So we have to think about in other ways of training our volunteers. And Of course, this all affects the retention. If we do not face that volunteers have less time than in the past, not because they are more busy, no, there are other interests, we are not the only option. If we do not realize that, maybe we are affecting our retention. So it's very important that we start to analyze that trends, that there are a lot of elements that should be considered in the life cycle. Not only in the way we are attracting our adults and the message we are throwing out. In this previous session we had, we were saying, of course, we have to be honest. Usually we just say, yes, you can come into our movement, and it will just take you 2 hours during a week preparing the session or the meeting, and then Saturday in the evening, okay. But after that, we realized that the training and evaluation and so on, it will take more than just 2 hours or 6 hours a week. But this is something that we have to keep in mind in our process, in the assessment, in the training, and of course in all the support we are giving in that way. Okay?
Therese?
Yeah, I just want to comment a little bit on what you've said in relation to looking at, how long a leader stays with us. And I think you're right, but I think it's more complicated than as you outlined, because I've done some work on this, and I've realized that, yes, it's about 2 years, but if a leader completes their training, you get 7 years. So I would say if you're going to do that kind of statistical analysis, be careful to do it in a way that you find out who has completed their training. And in a way, that makes more pressure on national organizations to say, let's get training done quickly, but let it be very top level. Because I've found that if you interest a leader by having a good training experience, then you get a longer life, you get a longer commitment. So if you're doing statistical analysis, would you please bear that in mind, where the hits come on the training.
That's right. Thank you. Anyone else want to comment? One of the trends that I've observed just recently is some NSOs or NSAs. Some NSOs or NSAs. I was inside the grey line, so I should be right. Now I've lost my train of thought. Are looking at whether you would say most of us are full-time leaders. We give a commitment that we give X number of hours per week and weekends and things like that. But there are NSOs that are now considering that the flexibility will be to allow a leader to come in once a month or once a fortnight or something like that. Now, that might assist them with the flexibility of their time commitment, but then the NSO needs to have a look at the training program. Because if the training program is going to take 3 years to get the wood badge, and they're only coming once a month, are we expecting them to stay, 7, 8, 10 years to get their wood badge, or are we going to have an adapted scheme for those people? It's just something to think about. But it's certainly something that I've heard quite a bit of discussion about recently. Any other comments? We have a little evaluation sheet that we would ask that you complete and maybe just put on the table as you leave. I'm sure Ralph would agree with me. We'd like to thank you for your participation. You really got into the discussion groups. It's sorry that you couldn't get through the 3 questions each, but at least you've discussed one. I've got a note taker somewhere taking some notes for us so that we can report back to the people online and see how we go. But thank you everybody for coming to this session. It's a difficult session because it is statistical. It's about trends, and it's about how do we apply those trends in scouting. So thank you very much, everybody. And we thank our online leaders here that are working hard for us.